All right, we are here with President and CEO of the Global Automakers of Canada, David Adams. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Paul and Michael. Appreciate it.
Okay, so there's obviously a whole lot going on. As of time of recording this interview, it is in the afternoon on Monday. So we know right now there's a big high-stakes meeting going on between President Trump and Mr. Trudeau, and they're figuring it out. They're talking about things. Maybe we'll have some news by the time this releases the next morning, but maybe not. Without a doubt, a lot of talk, a lot of fear, a lot of resolve going both ways as these tariffs have been threatened, placed. I don't even know where they are. They're just kind of going into effect potentially. We hear everything from the American side. Obviously, our partners on the Canadian side affect both parties. And we thought it'd be great to get some perspective from the Canadians and from you and yourself. How are automakers looking at this? What is the feeling and the sentiment around dealers? And how are you preparing to potentially deal with tariffs so that we can keep serving customers?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, but let's start by saying, look, where we are right now, as the president has indicated, again, that could change as a result of the conversation that the prime minister and the president are having as we talk, basically. But as it stands right now, the president plans on enforcing tariffs on essentially all products from Canada as of this evening, I guess, coming into effect at 12:01. Canada, on late Saturday evening, the prime minister announced a package of $155 billion in retaliatory tariffs, if you will, with first tranche potentially going into effect on February 4th as well. That would be $30 billion. And then the government will be undertaking a consultation on what other products that could potentially form the rest of that $125 billion that would be applied to U.S. imports. So rapidly heading into a tariff war unless this can be averted. And it's, I know it was just perhaps one piece of news in the U.S., but if you were watching Canadian TV, CBC, CTV, streaming like all day Saturday on what about the tariffs and what this means for Canadians. So it's, it's a salient issue in the hearts and minds of, I think, all Canadians at this point in time.
Can you
I was going to say something that I think is so unique about Canada-U.S. relations in particular is that here you have two countries that could essentially, by all stretch of the imagination, self-suffice without any trade between the two, right? Canada makes its own automobiles. It has fresh water and minerals and lumber and oil and then you have America just south across the border, which has lumber and minerals and oil and could potentially make its own vehicles. So what do you think they're really trying to get at? What's your opinion on what they're really trying to figure out here? Is it the quote unquote unfairness, as they've said, or do you think there's an underlying issue that they're really trying to expose?
Yeah, I guess what I would start with is your premise there, Michael. And I think the reality is that we're interdependent. We need each other, and perhaps maybe Canada needs the U.S. more than the U.S. needs Canada. But the reality is that for things such as electricity, oil, I think you guys get something like about 60% of your oil imports come from Canada. So critical minerals, and you can say, well, those are necessary for the EV industry. Well, okay, maybe the president doesn't care that much about EVs, but he does care about national security and being able to build planes and defense equipment and steel and aluminum. Aluminum is a major export into the United States. But, by the same token, I think there's about 34 U.S. states where Canada is the largest market for those states. If you look at Ontario alone, where I'm based, if we were our own economy, we would be about I think it's about the third or fourth largest economy that trades with the United States. So, look, we've had a long history of having an integrated economy, building things together. And that's no more is that truer than in the automotive industry, as opposed to building things for each other. So automotive industry, you wind the clock back to 1965 when the Auto Pact was first signed, which was the first stage towards free trade, sectoral free trade in the automotive industry. So we've had again, like we're talking 60 years of experience of building those industries together, building vehicles together, having parts in Canada go into components in the United States, coming back to finished vehicles in Canada and vice versa. So I guess my message there would be is that you're not hurting one side of the border without hurting the other side of the border with tariffs. And I think that will come home to roost. And we've already seen some statements coming out of some of the auto trade associations in the U.S. saying that these tariffs are highly ill-advised.
I think I like your sentiment there, and I do think that the people who are kind of caught in between all of this, right? If there are deeper issues that people are trying to like move across and like get the point across, the reality is the industries in both countries, respectively, the auto industry does genuinely believe we're better together. And so, and that's, I think, one of the most beautiful things about business in general. Business finds a way to cooperate, finds a way to make things work, finds middle ground, because that's kind of the premise of doing global business or doing international business. Can you give us a little overview of what your position actually entails? Because I'm sure our audience is not familiar. And if you could just give us a summary of what your purview is as the president and CEO.
Yeah, well, I think just to highlight for your viewers, listeners, our industry association, we have 16 member companies. 2 of those member companies produce vehicles in Canada, Honda and Toyota. There are 5 companies that actually produce vehicles in Canada, Honda, Toyota, Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis. So we have some of the producers, and there's another trade association that has the remainder of the producers. But I think from our perspective as an association, we've always taken the position that tariffs are anathema to growing an economy. They are essentially a tax on business that ends up getting passed on to consumers. They end up impeding economic growth, and I think these are all the things that we will start to see, as these tariffs play out, unless we can get some speedy resolution to this, which is what we're all hoping for. I think the president had a discussion with the president of Mexico earlier today, and I understand from that discussion, Mexico essentially got a stay of execution with respect to the tariffs for another month because they agreed to. I think they've committed 10,000 troops to the border. Made some commitments on fentanyl and who knows what else. And I think the problem for everybody is that it's very unclear to Canadians, to Mexicans, and to perhaps the European Union, who he's supposedly coming after next, kind of what do you want? What will satisfy you? And it's been fentanyl and the illegal migrants coming over the border for Canada and Mexico. But I would argue from a Canadian perspective, look, it's magnitudes of difference between Canada and Mexico. If you look at fentanyl, for instance, I think U.S. stats show that it was about 38 pounds that came in from Canada and 11,000 pounds or more that came in from Mexico. So we're 0.01% of the fentanyl problem. Does that mean that we shouldn't do anything? Well, no, absolutely. I think our governments have always worked collaboratively together to safeguard the border and to also streamline the border, because both of our economies depend on one another for the trade that we talked about earlier on.
I've always been curious about this piece. So they announce a tariff. Is it as quick as like you see it on the next invoice?
Great question.
How quick does it actually show up? How quickly do we assume that price or that tax, as you've suggested, that gets passed on to consumer is recognized?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'm not sure that I've got a complete answer for you. But what I do know is that look, some companies will say, well, I don't want to be in a position where I'm passing all of that onto my consumer, so I'll eat a portion of it for a bit. They might not be able to do that forever, but reality is that it will at some point get passed along to the consumer. In terms of when it actually impacts goods crossing the border, for instance, my understanding of the situation is that, okay, the executive order has been given. There would have to be some, I think, guidance documents, if nothing else, put together for border officials and that kind of thing. And can that all be done between, Saturday when the tariffs were announced
I
and the
mean, we have
4th?
ChatGPT now, so right. David, our time is just about up, but I have one, probably the most
Sure.
important question. Do Canadians watch the Super Bowl, and if so, who are they rooting for this year?
Well, they do watch the Super Bowl, but the tied to our discussion is everybody's talking about how much more the avocados and the beer is going to cost because of the tariffs. So, look, I think it'll be a good game, and I think it would probably depend on the Canadian, who they think might win the Super Bowl. But
Regardless of the familiar color with one of the teams, I would argue that the best team is the one that is not red.
Well, I'm trying to think now. Dave. Who in our league has the reputation of the cheating Chiefs? Is it the BC Lions? Is it the Tiger Cats? Like who do we give that title
you're
to?
asking the wrong guy. I don't follow football that much. I follow hockey. So we want to talk
Who do
hockey.
we give it to? Is it the Maple Leafs or is it the Stampede? Or is it the Calgary Flames? Is it maybe the
Look, I'm
Canucks?
just surprised you got all those names for the different teams there.
Yeah,
Michael.
listen to him go. He's
Winnipeg
just flexing
Jets,
now. He's just bragging. All
the
I know,
Ottawa Senators.
as a son of South Philadelphia, I welcome all of Canada to be Eagles fans next
Eagles
Sunday.
fans. There you go.
Oh, well, Dave, this has been such a joy. Thank you so much for joining us, certainly on late notice. Dave Adams, the president and CEO of Global Automakers of Canada, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, guys. Anytime. Appreciate it.